Yep,
And yes, even your own life.
it's true. This isn't just about Luke Skywalker
Okay.
or Harry Potter.
Right.
We're talking about a blueprint for growth and transformation that's hardwired into us, into our very psyches.
Okay, that sounds kind of deep. Where do we even start?
Well, think about those classic stories. They often begin in the ordinary world.
Okay.
Think Frodo Baggins in the Shire.
Right.
Or maybe even your own routine before things got interesting.
Okay, so you're just living your life, maybe a little bored, maybe feeling a little stuck. And then what? A wizard shows up.
You'd be surprised. It might not be a wizard,
Okay.
but there's often a call to adventure. Something disrupts your normal routine, shakes things up.
Right.
It could be a new opportunity, a challenge, even a crisis.
Ugh,
Yeah.
I've been there. And it's terrifying and exciting all at the same time. It's like that feeling before you go on a roller coaster.
Right.
You kind of want to get off, but you also know you'll regret it if you don't go for it.
Exactly. And that internal back and forth,
Yeah.
that's the refusal of the call.
Okay.
It's completely natural to hesitate to want to stay in our comfort zones. But eventually the hero has to decide.
So what happens if you actually say yes to the call?
That's when you cross the threshold.
Yeah.
You're leaving behind the familiar, stepping into the unknown. This is where the real journey begins.
And things usually get a little messy from there, don't they?
Well, every hero needs challenges, right?
Yeah.
This is where we meet mentors and allies, those figures who provide guidance and support.
Right.
Think Yoda, Dumbledore,
Yeah.
even that one really supportive friend we all have.
It's like they're saying, hey, this path might be tough, but you've got this. I believe in you. They're the ones that see something in you, even when you don't see it in yourself.
And just like those stories, we'll likely encounter tests and trials along the way.
Right.
Challenges that force us to grow, to learn new skills. Remember, it's often in these struggles that we discover our true strength.
But it's not just about external battles, is it? Don't we also have to face those internal demons?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's where the concept of the shadow comes in. It's not about being a villain,
Right.
but rather about those parts of ourselves we tend to hide. Our fears, insecurities, the things that hold us back.
Okay. I'm sensing this is a pretty important part of the journey. Can you break down this whole shadow thing a bit more?
It's like this. Deep down, we all share a common human experience.
Okay.
This is what Carl Jung, a famous psychologist, called the collective unconscious. The shadow archetype is one of many within that shared space, and it represents the parts of ourselves we don't want to admit to. But here's the thing. We can't fully step into our potential until we confront our shadow.
So how does this play out in those epic stories? I'm drawing a blank here.
Think of Simba from The Lion King.
Okay.
He had to confront his uncle Scar,
Right.
who represents an external threat, right?
Right.
But his real victory came when he finally accepted his own responsibility in his father's death. That was Simba confronting his shadow, his guilt, his self-doubt.
Wow, that's actually a really powerful way to look at it. So it's not about defeating some external enemy. It's about overcoming those internal battles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And facing those internal battles is often the scariest part of the journey, which brings us to the abyss.
Ooh.
This is usually the lowest point in the hero's journey where everything feels impossible.
Like, I've come this far and for what kind of thing.
Precisely. But what's fascinating is that the abyss is also the turning point.
Okay.
This is where true transformation begins.
Okay.
Like a caterpillar in a cocoon.
Right.
It's messy, it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary for growth.
So the abyss isn't something to be afraid of. It's something to lean into.
In a way, yes. Because on the other side of that struggle, that descent into our darkest fears, is where we discover our greatest strength and wisdom.
So we're pushing through the abyss, embracing the messiness of transformation.
Right.
It's kind of like hitting rock bottom,
Yeah.
but then realizing, hey, there's nowhere to go but up from here.
It's a powerful shift in perspective.
Yeah.
And it's often in those moments of surrender, of accepting where we are, that the real magic happens.
So what does that magic look like? How do we know we're actually making it through to the other side of the abyss?
Think of it like this. The abyss forces us to shed old versions of ourselves.
Okay.
Those limiting beliefs that were holding us back. It's like a snake shedding its skin so it can keep growing.
Okay, so we're shedding the old, but what does that actually feel like? Give me an example.
Imagine someone who's always struggled with public speaking because of a fear of judgment.
Right.
They finally get up the courage to give a presentation, and it doesn't go well. The old them might have retreated back into their shell, but the person who's gone through the abyss they're able to look at that experience with a new perspective.
You okay?
They can acknowledge their fear, learn from the experience, and try again with a new sense of resilience.
Right.
That's growth.
I love that. It's like we're not defined by our failures or setbacks, but by how we choose to learn from them.
Exactly.
But doesn't it take a lot of courage to keep going after something like that?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, the hero's journey isn't about becoming fearless.
Mm-hmm.
It's about acknowledging our fears and choosing to move forward anyway.
Right.
And that brings us to the resurrection stage.
Resurrection. Are we talking zombie apocalypse here?
Not quite,
Okay.
but it can feel like a rebirth.
Okay.
We've faced our shadow, we've gone through the fire of the abyss, and now we're emerging stronger, wiser, and more aligned with our true selves.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah,
So we're essentially shedding those old layers and stepping into a more authentic version of ourselves?
precisely.
Hmm.
And with this new clarity, often comes a desire to share what we've learned,
Okay.
to use our experience to help others.
Right.
This is what Joseph Campbell called returning with the elixir.
I love that visual. It's like we went on this crazy adventure, collected some magical potion or artifact, and now we get to share it with the world.
Right.
What would you say are some examples of elixirs in our everyday lives?
It can be anything from sharing your story to inspire others, to
Yeah.
using your newfound strength to advocate for a cause you believe in.
Right.
It could be as simple as being a more patient parent or a more supportive friend.
So it's about recognizing that our personal growth, our elixir, so to speak, isn't just for us.
Yeah.
It has the power to create positive change in the world around us.
Exactly. The hero's journey is ultimately about recognizing that we're all connected.
Right.
Our individual journeys of transformation have ripple effects that extend far beyond ourselves.
That's a powerful thought. But what about those times when we don't feel like heroes? When we're stuck in that ordinary world and the call to adventure seems more like a whisper we're trying to ignore?
It's important to remember that the hero's journey isn't a one-time deal. It's a cycle we move through throughout our lives.
Right.
There will be times when we feel stuck, uninspired, even lost.
So those moments aren't failures, they're just part of the process.
Precisely. It's in those moments of stillness, of seeming inaction, that we often gain the clarity and strength to hear that next call to adventure whenever it appears.
It's reassuring to know that even when we feel like we're just going through the motions, there's a bigger pattern at play, that maybe those quieter times are actually preparing us for the next big adventure.
Exactly. It's like we're gathering strength, wisdom, and resources during those periods of rest.
Okay.
We're integrating the lessons from past journeys so we can be ready when that next call comes.
So how do we learn to recognize those calls? They probably don't always come with a booming voice and a spotlight, do they?
Not usually. Sometimes the call to adventure shows up as a whisper in our own hearts,
Yeah.
a longing for something more,
Right.
a new passion we want to explore.
It's like that feeling you get when you've been reading a good book and you can't wait to see what happens next, but you also don't want the story to end.
What a perfect analogy.
Mm.
And just like with a good book, we have to trust that the most satisfying journeys are the ones we choose for ourselves.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the hero's journey, what's the one thing you hope listeners take away from this conversation?
I hope they realize that they don't need to wait for permission to live a life of purpose and adventure.
Right.
The hero's journey isn't reserved for fictional characters.
Right.
It's happening all around us, within each of us.
Yeah.
Every choice we make, every challenge we face is an opportunity to step into our own heroic potential.
I love that. It's a reminder that we're all capable of growth, transformation, and making a difference in the world. And that even when things get tough, even when we stumble or fall, we have the strength within us to rise again, stronger and wiser than before.
Beautifully said. And remember, the journey itself is the reward.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the ups and downs, the challenges and triumphs, and trusting that each experience is shaping us into the heroes we're meant to be.
So to our listeners out there, what's your call to adventure? What's that one thing you've been wanting to do, that dream you've been putting off? Maybe it's time to say why yes to that call, to step into the unknown and see where the journey takes you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and never stop believing in your own heroic potential.